Today is September the 8th, 2017. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University. And today I am in Oklahoma City at the zoo, Oklahoma City Zoo, to speak with Lance Swearengin, who is the horticultural curator here at the Oklahoma City Zoo. So thank you for meeting with me today.
Thank you, Tanya. I appreciate you coming out.
And this is going to be part of our Spotlight in Oklahoma series focused on monarch butterflies here in Oklahoma. So let's start with learning a little bit about you. When and where were you born?
I was born in Midwest City, Oklahoma on June 1st, 1977.
And do you have brothers and sisters?
I do have lots of brothers and sisters in my family. I'm one of the youngest, and so big family.
How many?
6 of us total.
Okay.
My father worked on Tinker Air Force Base, so I was raised in Midwest City. Went to Soldier Creek Elementary School, and to Carl Albert Junior High, Carl Albert High School. Never changed schools. So had a nice quiet life in Midwest City, gardening with my mother.
That's how that interest got started.
It is, yeah. My mother always had a really nice rose garden, and I remember being out there with her as a kid, playing in her petunias and picking more of them than actually helping. But something that has really inspired me has been my mother's rose garden and those yellow roses that she grew in her small garden there in Midwest City.
So during high school, were you a member of FFA or 4-H to tie into this as well?
I was a member of FFA in high school. I was absolutely more interested in the plant portion of it than the livestock portion of it, not really knowing how important plants and animals both would be to me later on in my career.
Do you have a favorite subject in high school?
My favorite subject in high school would probably be English, literature. Those subjects really interest me. Later in high school, chemistry was something that I really enjoyed.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah.
And did you participate in sports?
No, didn't participate in sports too much. I spent most of my time reading. Okay. And so that's kind of what I mainly did whenever I was in high school, was read and study. I loved to read since the time I was a kid, so I usually had my nose in a book.
And what would you do for fun? Read besides read?
Well, besides read, so when I was a child, I liked to travel. And by that, I mean on my bicycle through my neighborhood to riparian habitats that surrounded our neighborhood and kind of offbeat areas. I liked being outside quite a bit as a kid and did a lot of camping trips with the family. My father was a big outdoorsman, and so I basically grew up outdoors, whether it be camping or traveling. We were always outside, and I really remember as a kid always wanting to be outside and not being inside so much.
Collect lightning bugs.
I love lightning bugs. Lightning bugs were so fun as a kid. Yeah.
And how often would you come into Oklahoma City, like to the zoo? Do you recall any of that?
Yeah, I recall my first time coming to the zoo, and it was on a field trip that we took as a kindergarten class from Soldier Creek Elementary School. The first time that I came through the zoo, and what I remember about the zoo then was our famous monkey ship that we had here, which was a large installation at what I call the old zoo, that we had back in the 80s before we had larger exhibits like we do now. We had some smaller exhibits, so I do remember coming here as a child, and off and on through school we would come on various field trips, and the zoo is always the highlight of those field trips.
Okay, and then what year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated high school in 1995, the year of the Oklahoma City bombing.
That's a memorable event too.
Yes, I was a senior in high school when the bombing happened downtown, and I distinctly remember that happening in the classroom. Yeah.
Felt it or just?
Well, we always had our windows open in the high school, and it was a beautiful sunny morning, and yeah, we could barely feel it, but we knew something was going on very quickly. Lots of commotion during that time, but so that's very memorable to my senior year when I graduated.
Okay. And so when you're thinking about what's next, were you considering other places besides where you chose?
As far as a career?
College.
Oh, as for college, yeah, I wanted to start out. I wanted to be in journalism because I really liked writing. Writing was something that reading. That's kind of one of my gifts, I feel like. And so when I left school, I wanted to be a journalist, and I wanted to be writing in newspapers because I was the editor of my senior high school newspaper. And so I wanted to continue that by starting out in Norman in journalism. And soon found out that I didn't want to be inside that much.
So by Norman, you mean the University of Oklahoma?
Yes.
Okay. So, and you switched gears?
I switched gears later on, and tried to figure out what my passion was for life, what I wanted to do, that when I woke up in the morning, I would love to go and do it. Because that's what's going to make me happy in my life, is to wake up and have something that use my gifts, the gifts that I've been given, and figure out what those were. And so eventually I found out what was going to make me happy was to be outside in the garden, working with plants, working with flowers and trees, and being that outdoorsy person that loves plants, loves to promote them. And that's kind of where I started thinking about science more, and where the science aspect to horticulture and gardening kind of came into the picture, and that kind of promoted me to want to go and study that more and really find out the science behind the gardens and horticulture.
And, you did not have that?
They didn't have really the vein that I wanted to go into, which what I really loved about horticulture and gardening was public gardening. So, botanical gardens, arboretums, zoos, amusement parks. Those kind of public gardens really interested me. And so that kind of promoted me to go to school in Stillwater and study public garden management. Stillwater has a great public gardens program, public horticulture. That's kind of rare. Not a whole lot of universities have that program. And so to have that so close by and being so interested in that, it was a no-brainer to go through that program and get that experience.
So did you graduate from OU or just do a couple of years and then switch to OSU?
No, I didn't graduate from OU. I started here at OSU OKC and took a couple of horticulture classes.
Okay.
And then once I got a couple classes under my belt, I was pretty sure that I was going to transfer up to Stillwater and finish my degree. And so before I even finished my associates there, I had already transferred all my credits and moved headlong into pursuing public garden management and public horticulture as my undergrad.
So that would have been late 90s, 1990s?
Yes, well, it was a little bit later than that. I graduated with my undergrad in 2013.
2013, okay.
Yes.
Took a little bit.
Yeah, it did. I had to work full time, and did a lot of my I would work a full-time job at a garden center or flower shop, and then take one class a semester until I could finally get that steam up, to take off and actually go to school full time.
Did you have a favorite professor?
Yes, I do. I have a couple. One of them is Dr. Lou Anella, who is my public garden management. He was my mentor, my advisor there, and really my go-to when I was first got to the university. So he made a big difference in my career. And another really strong, memorable mentor at the university was Dr. Bruce Dunn. He really helped a lot through my master's, and kind of put me on a path to success regarding research and learning about what goes into doing botanical research. And so that was really beneficial to me.
And you did a thesis, a master's thesis?
Yeah, I did.
What was your topic?
The topic of my thesis was chlorophyll leaf sensors and ornamental landscape plants. And the project was a 2-year project where I took data there in Stillwater in the greenhouses. I grew out a crop of ornamental landscape plants and conducted a study using chlorophyll leaf sensor technology on these plants, and developed a mobile phone application that growers could use to determine if their plant needed fertilizer or not. So It's kind of a futuristic thing that a lot of people don't know about. Chlorophyll leaf sensors, you can clip that onto the leaf and it determines how much chlorophyll is in that leaf, which gives you an indication to how much nutrients and fertilizer is in the soil. So just by taking a sample of your crop using chlorophyll leaf sensors, you can basically determine, if you know what your said plant needs as far as nutrient requirements. You can kind of tell from a sample of that crop, if you know the nutrient requirements, if it's a healthy crop, or if you need to add fertilizer, or if you need to not add fertilizer. One great part of that project is that if you know to add fertilizer when you need it and not add it when you don't, then you're not over applying fertilizers, which is you're saving fertilizer runoff into land and surface waters and those kind of things. So there's a conservation aspect to that for large growing operations. It was a lot of work. It was a tough 2 years getting through that initial part where you're taking data, for 4 hours a day, and a lot of numbers there. There was also an outdoor component to that I conducted at the Oklahoma State University Botanical Garden in their drought tolerant plant plot there, and I took leaf samples there for 2 years on selected plants, and determined what were good values, so that I could judge the two basic studies against each other. So yeah, that was what I did for my thesis.
And successfully defended in 2016?
Yes, successfully defended in December of 2016 with some minor corrections, and was awarded that degree close to Christmas, and we have an article out now that's trying to get published in the Journal of Plant Nutrition.
So is PhD in your future?
PhD is something that I've thought about, and I love school. I've loved being in school. Once you get out of school, when you go for your master's, you kind of want to be back in it, because you're in the realm of possibilities and you're learning new things, and you're around people that are highly educated and always reading and come up with something new, and you're being around the university and being around those people that are studying is very valuable. And so a PhD in the future is not out of the question. I think that would be something I'd like to pursue, and so
why not?
It's a possibility.
Sure.
Yeah.
And while you were at OSU, did you have a part-time job?
I worked as a graduate student aide, so helping out with the classes, some of the classes and things like that, and I did work here at the zoo part-time when I was doing my undergrad and master's. So I would go to school during the week in Stillwater, and then come home on the weekends, and then come out here and work for the weekend, and then go back to school. So I did that for quite a long time.
And then you also interned at the library?
I did. Whenever I was in my undergrad, I did work at the Edmond Lowe Library in the Special Collections Department on a very interesting project, considering what I'm studying. I worked on the Bellamy Parks Jansen Botanical Illustrations collection, which is very interesting collection of hand-drawn, morphologically correct botanical drawings that Bellamy Park Jansen has done for many years for lots of educational and instructional botanical and horticultural identification books, reference books. They're very, very exact drawings of leaf samples and fruit and flowers of different plants that students can use to identify them, through photos. Very interesting drawings. I got to touch some of her originals and, basically work as a curator on that collection, cataloging and filing and documenting what was in the collection. I think a portion of it was given to the library. And so that was a very nice taste of what being a curator and curating a collection was all about. And so I'm just thankful that it was botanically geared. And so that was a very fun part of my time at the university.
You had the foundational knowledge you needed to help do that.
Right.
Not just anyone could have, I don't think.
Right. So just learning about the morphological mechanisms on plants that allow us to identify them was a good foundation to get from that experience. And so it's not something that everybody wants to delve into and know, but it's useful information because plants are very similar, and just a small modification such as a hair on the underside of the leaf can really tell you where that plant's from and whether it's a variety or just it can really help you tell your plants apart.
And along that same line, you did something with the herbarium?
Yes, yeah. So I also worked in the herbarium in the botany department in Stillwater. And that was another touch at doing curation. But that time I'm getting to touch real live plant material or dried plant material. So herbariums keep dried plant specimens that are collected, whether they be native or from a general garden, and those are identified through their morphological features, and then given a name and truly identified, and those become type specimens that students or people can go and pull out and look at and determine if the specimen that they're trying to identify from the garden is the true specimen that's been identified in the herbarium by a specialist. So herbariums are very interesting because herbarium specimens can be very old. They can last for years and years and years with the right care. And so seeing some of those really old herbarium specimens that were probably there when the university was first created and thought of as a land-grant institution was very special and interesting. A lot of great horticulturists have passed through those halls and through that herbarium, and so that was a privilege to be able to work on that project.
It sounds like you had a lot of well-rounded experiences to bring you to this point today.
I really enjoyed my time in Stillwater and all of the experiences I had there, from conducting research to working in the library, really made a difference in my well-rounded education and gave me good insight into what I wanted to accomplish with my degrees, and the reason that I did all of the work and learned everything I did there. And that's kind of, even from working in the herbarium to doing my internships, those were really important parts of my education too, were doing those horticultural internships that are required. So that really made an impact on me. But yeah, very well-rounded experiences in horticulture through the university have brought me where I am now.
At what point, at your earliest point, what were you thinking you wanted to do as your career once you shifted gears from journalism to horticulture?
That's
End goal.
Yeah, probably early, my mid-20s. I kind of knew that I liked gardening and I liked plants and things were green, and I love that. And I always kind of had that gene in me and my family. My older relatives always had vegetable gardens, and that's always kind of been with me. And then so I think I've always kind of known that I wanted to be in horticulture and to be a grower and a gardener, and be that person that's promoting botanicals.
So an option for job would be the zoo, obviously, and then you had mentioned amusement parks.
Yeah, so
or have your own company, I guess.
Well, whenever I did my internship for my undergrad in Stillwater, I was awarded an internship with the Walt Disney Company in Florida. And so I went to the Magic Kingdom one summer and was awarded a professional internship in horticulture with them. And that's where I worked with a group of like-minded students from across the nation, a small group. We worked in the gardens of the Magic Kingdom theme park and the Polynesian Resort Hotel there. And I did that for a complete summer, and that was a life-changing experience because that was the real experience of working in public horticulture out in the field. You know, the Walt Disney Company has some expansive gardens that go along with their amusement parks and resorts, and so being involved with that large corporation, that really taught me a lot, and it was a definite learning experience. And you know, the real hands-on in the soil planting and learning palm trees, and you know, that was monumental. I went back and interned a couple more times at different locations, so Epcot, and then Animal Kingdom theme park, which kind of brought me around to the idea that we grow plants to feed ourselves and to feed animals, and animals eat plants, and we fed animals from the plants we grew at Disney's Animal Kingdom. And so that kind of, whenever I came back, I really wanted to be involved in the zoo, a zoo, and luckily my home zoo is a botanical garden.
Well, while you were in Orlando, did anything surprise you? Something you weren't expecting at Magic Kingdom?
I wasn't expecting to get poison ivy, and I was not expecting to work so hard and not enjoy it so much, because I worked incredibly hard and wanted to be out there gardening rather than riding roller coasters. And looking back now, I wish I probably should have taken off a little more and rode some roller coasters instead of gardening so much. But, you know, it was a dream come true. It really was. And I still think about it quite a bit, because it was a very good experience.
Did you have to do the topiaries?
Yes, yeah, I did a lot of work with the topiaries. We would have, there were several occasions when we would have to do, I guess what you call a scene change, and come in overnight, you know, at midnight, and completely renovate an area and change it out so that when they opened the doors the next day, it was a completely different scene. And so I had some experience working with the large topiaries that they install. Mine was one of the ballerina hippopotamuses from one of the earlier Disney films, but very large, and so that was very interesting. You know, you learn so many things when you work for a company like that, and I'm able to bring that to what I'm doing now, and so I keep those memories and what I've learned there and the experiences I had at the forefront of my mind, and try to keep them very present.
Did you have contact with the public?
Yes.
In that position?
Yeah, absolutely. So smiling, waving, you know, whenever we have gardeners out, you know, there's always children looking and saying, what's he doing in the garden? And you always have people very inquisitive about what you're doing when you're in the gardens. And that goes for here at the zoo or at Disney. You know, people are they want to know what you're doing. And so guest experience and being a part of the guests, you know, day, and telling them what you're doing, or chatting with them and being a part of the show, was a big part of working at Disney, as it is here at the zoo.
And would you be checking for insects and bugs as well?
Sure. Yeah. So any part of a gardener's job is always scouting for insects. Whether they be mosquitoes or bees or aphids or scale, the dreaded scale. But yeah, and especially in Florida with tropical plants, they have lots of different plant pests. So not uncommon to be wearing many hats in the horticulture trade, you know, from pest control to planting to turf technician to irrigation technician. Lots of different moving parts go into being a horticulturist and being in public gardening.
A lot.
Yeah.
So once you graduated with your undergraduate degree, did you go to work immediately?
I did come on full-time with the zoo, and then while I was doing that, completed my master's, and so I've been with the zoo for 5 years, since 2010.
And do you have a favorite part?
A favorite part of the zoo as far as the landscape? Yeah, so one of my favorite gardens is our butterfly and pollinator garden that we have on Lakeside near the lake, and it's one of the largest butterfly gardens in Oklahoma. It's over 22,000 square feet and expanding rapidly, because Pollinators are really important. They're important for our food crops. They're important for our flowering crops. Plants have to reproduce, and those pollinators are really important to make that happen. So there's been a push in recent years, across the nation to support our pollinators. And that's kind of the cornerstone of the botanical garden, and our master plan is to support our pollinators, to support our monarch butterflies, which are in decline. And so we're doing that here at the zoo. That's part of our conservation efforts, and part of the botanical garden research that we're doing is monarch tagging. So we've been doing that for 20 years here at the zoo, where we tag monarchs on their migration path through Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a really important way station for monarchs as they migrate north to south. And so we've provided them a nice little resource here at the zoo. So we've been tagging them for about 20 years. And what's significant is that last year we tagged 177 monarchs. And one of them was recovered down in Mexico. A 16-hour drive from the zoo, and that little guy made it all the way down to Mexico, it's significant to have one recovered. So we're very proud of that, and this year I hope to tag even more as they come through.
Well, how do you tag such a small thing that just little has to be small?
Monarchs they're resilient. They're strong, and I'm hoping they're even stronger to make a comeback from their declining population numbers. But tagging monarchs, you capture them in a net, and then you place a very, very small sticker on the outside of their back wing and record the number. So you're collecting the data. You also collect the sex of the butterfly, which you can tell just by looking at the back wings, and then you just release them. And so it seems like it's hard to tag a butterfly, right? But you can handle them somewhat to get them tagged. And our butterfly garden is a monarch way station. So we provide nectar plants, host plants for caterpillars, and then lots and lots of milkweed. Oklahoma's native milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa, butterfly milkweed, is a really important part of monarchs. And so we put that in every single year, and we have it come back every single year. We just really make sure we have lots of milkweed in our garden.
Do you spread it around, or is it just localized to that one?
We have milkweed throughout the zoo. A lot of it is in our Oklahoma Trails exhibit near our Joan Kirkpatrick Animal Hospital. Most of it's in our butterfly garden, though, just because I like to do our botanical garden tours down there and kind of highlight that. So there's a small area down there that I've kind of named Milkweed Hill. And so you can see lots of different types of milkweed down there, not just the native tuberosa, but lots of the other various types of milkweed in Asclepiaceae.
And how long has that area been designated for butterfly?
That area has been down there probably over 10 years. I'm not exactly sure when it was first created. Maybe in the late 90s was when it was developed. And it's always been our butterfly garden. So yeah, it's been there since late 90s.
Well, do you know how they got interested in tagging them if it's been 20 years?
So pollinators and butterflies kind of go right along with gardening. And so that's something that most public gardens, watch out for their pollinators, watch where they're spraying, and watch the populations come through. And so doing that monarch tagging and collecting that data is just real important as part of a public garden, to be a part of the conservation efforts regarding our pollinators, and especially monarchs.
Well, do you do other things, collaborate with other people or other agencies in regards to the butterfly?
Yeah, we sure do. We collaborate with the Nature Conservancy. Recently we went on a butterfly count, which was very interesting, where we went out and we just counted as many different types of butterflies as we could find. And that was a very, very fun count. We counted quite a bit. I don't remember how many, but there were lots of different varieties of butterflies in Oklahoma, and it's good to see them.
And that brings up tools of the trade. How do you, I mean, what would you need to count them? I guess binoculars?
Yeah, so binoculars or an eyeglass, very good guidebook, a data sheet of native butterflies for the region. And typically what you would do is start out in the field with everybody kind of spread out in a line, and you just kind of make your way through the field of wildflowers, and then you'd have one person behind you with your clipboard, and you're calling out buckeye, black tiger swallowtail, or you'd be calling out your butterflies, and they would just kind of be logging them. And then once you get to the end of the field, then you go to another location and survey that location.
And what kind of clothing would you have on? I'm thinking of snakes.
Yeah, so we saw a couple snakes. We came back with lots of chicker bites, and jokingly it was the butterfly expedition because we were eaten by chiggers. And so long pants, a nice hat because usually it's midsummer, bug spray, sunscreen, those kind of things.
Well, in your daily job here, similar tools?
Yeah, absolutely. So a good pair of pruners. So a good pair of Felco pruners right on your hip, a nice folding saw, gloves, sunscreen, bug spray, a nice shovel. It's always great. So just your basic gardening supplies. But a good pair of Felcos will take you a long ways.
And photographs? Take your cell phone and take pictures if you need something?
Almost every day. I mean, when you're in love with plants and you're out there gardening, you see something significant almost every day. And whether it's a flower that's in a different phase of bloom or just opening, or a very odd leaf type. And here at the zoo, we have over 160 acres of gardens and naturalized wild areas. So there's always something significant to snap a photo with your smartphone so that you can remember, or later take into the office and diagnose, whether it be identification of a certain plant or a certain pest. So the rise in technology has really increased our awareness and ability to learn more.
Well, do you do an inventory, like of the plants?
Yes.
Do you keep a running list or something?
We do, yes. We currently have over 5,000 tracked plant accessions. And my job as curator is to curate the botanical collections. We have an overall arching botanical collection which encompasses every plant within the zoo boundaries. Within that overall collection, we have 12 to 15 designated botanical collections. So those collections could be anything from a collection of plants that are all within one genus, or a collection of plants that are all within one plant family, or they could be a special collection such as the Butterfly Garden Collection, which is a lot of different plants, but they all center around one theme, which is butterflies and pollinators. Or our water conservation garden, which focuses on plants that conserve water and promotes educational aspects that go into conserving our most precious natural resource, which is water.
So drought resistant?
Yeah, drought resistant plants, which is something I'm really interested in because I'm a cactus collector. Cactus and succulents have been something that I really enjoyed in my life personally. I have a personal collection at home, and luckily we have a very nice cactus and agave collection here at the zoo, which really, now that I think about it, has kind of inspired me in some ways to be here and promote our botanical collections.
And I was reading somewhere you did cross timbers, something to do with cross timbers?
I was going to say too, I didn't know, I don't think we brought this up, but the zoo is an accredited botanical garden.
Okay.
And that's, Lance's team is a big part of keeping that going.
Yeah, so we're a nationally accredited botanical garden. We received national accreditation through the American Association of Museums back in 1998, and we're also considered an accredited living museum. So being a botanical garden and an accredited one, you have to there's a couple of things that you have to do. And part of that is you have to educate the public on botanicals, on your botanical collections. You have to house botanical collections, and you have to track those. Like I mentioned earlier, through plant accessions, which we have over 5,000 now. That's kind of my job, is to track those plants. And it's really interesting to go out into the botanical garden and find a tree and get the accession number off of it, or research that tree and go back to the file that's been created and find out that it was planted in 1980, and find out where it was purchased, how much it was, what the scientific name for it was then, or because that could have changed. Taxonomists are kind of tricky, as they like to change plant taxonomy quite a bit. So that's a very interesting part, is the history of the gardens.
Well, 1980s, that would have been before computers were so popular. Did you go back and as retro?
So all of our botanical accessions have a paper copy, because we started tracking those right around 1980. What's interesting is that we're just now in the process of digitizing all of that and putting GPS coordinates on each of those plant accessions. And so that's a very interesting part. Just because we have 5,000 plant accessions doesn't mean that there's just 5,000 files. Plants get de-accessed too. Due to disease, a tree will die, or and you have to de-access that. So the files on our botanical collection are quite extensive.
And I guess just because you have one doesn't mean there's not 50 plants out there. You just have one accession one time.
Right. Yeah. So you'll make one true type specimen plant accession. Let's say for post oak and Quercus stellata. So you'll make one accession for that, and then you'll have different item accessions underneath that for all the 1,000 that we have here on grounds.
Do you have what's the oldest? Do you know what the oldest?
Our oldest living specimen?
Yeah.
Our oldest specimen is a petrified tree that is estimated to be over 5 million years old, and it resides outside of our herpetarium building, which is our oldest building, I believe, on zoo grounds. And so those two kind of go together. Our oldest living specimen, I would have to say, is there's probably 3 of them. The 3 large bur oak trees, Quercus macrocarpa, that are located in our Asian deer yard and on the west side of our existing pachyderm building. There are 3 large bur oak trees there. One of them is estimated to be over 120 years old.
Older than the state.
It's quite significant. And in addition to that, being part of the cross timbers ecosystem, we have lots of historic oak groves dotted throughout the zoo, whether they be in gardens or within exhibitry. Those oak groves are significant because oak trees grow very slowly. And so some of the trees out here although they may not be giant, 50-foot trees, they're still significant because they're quite old. So you could look at an oak tree and it may not look significant in size, but it could be an 80-year-old tree. And so my job has been to protect those historic oak groves that are part of the cross timbers and document them and make sure that they're here for future generations.
What's the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job is probably dealing with the weather. So any gardener is probably going to say that, and it's very true. So gardening and weather, meteorology, horticulture, they just go right together, because everything you do in a garden is impacted by the weather. Whether it be a drought that comes through and dries up your land for 8 to 10 years like we recently have, which causes trees to kind of go in decline, and then once those trees go into decline, pests invade them, and then you have dead trees. So lots of environmental factors are probably the hardest part of working in horticulture, and especially in public gardening.
And then the flip side of that, what's your favorite part?
My favorite part of the job is renovation of older gardens and the historical aspect of the gardens as the way that they used to be, and collecting. I've always kind of been a collector, and like I collect cactus, and so I love collecting plants for our plant collections. So being a plant collector is probably my best part of my job. You know, purchasing plants and adding them to the collection.
That's what I was gonna say, besides going beside the road and picking one up and let's add this.
Yeah, so you know, that happens. You know, I could take a little cutting here and there, or take a little specimen of seed and grow that out and add to our native collection here.
Yeah, I think some of the tribes are beginning to do that, inventory native seeds.
Yeah, it's important. You know, those plants evolve over time. They get cross-pollinated or pollinated with plants that we've developed as a society and civilization. So it's important to have germplasm and seed from those natives that are true natives. That's really important.
So on a typical day, take us through a typical day.
Okay, so a typical day consists of me basically coordinating with my staff. So you know, getting them kind of going for the day and making them aware of what needs to occur for the day. A big part of that is letting them know what animal browse needs to be delivered. So I kind of keep good track of which animals are getting browse, which animal browse is plant material that we cut from the botanical collection and provide to the animal collection. So those are things like elm, mulberry, hackberry, lots of native plants that we can use to provide to the keepers in the animal collection to accentuate their diets. And then there's also things like tropical plants, so banana, ginger, even things that are you wouldn't think that animals would eat, like hibiscus flowers for our Galapagos tortoises, or cactus for the tortoises. So that is kind of keep track of that and alert staff and let them know, Fred the elk, he might need some elm today, or the Galapagos tortoises need some Opuntia cactus, so be sure and take care of them. And then writing a lot of policy and coordinating with the public by doing presentations, or reaching out to our fellow gardeners and checking in with them, ordering plant material, preparing for zoo events such as Zoo Blooms, our wonderful tulip festival, which we started in 2016 and bloomed in 2017. We're doing that again this year. So another fun part of my job is sitting down and getting to order 100,000 tulip bulbs, which is amazing to be able to order the quantities and design the colors for each of the mass statements that we're doing here in the Botanical Garden. That's really fun. Ordering 100,000 bulbs is pretty cool.
We need a little artistic talent.
Yeah,
to design.
Absolutely. So an eye for which colors kind of go together, or which colors are going to pop, whether it be in the shade or in the sun. And there's also the aspect of coordinating those colors with different sponsors that want to sponsor us in our events.
And you don't have to plant all of those yourself, do you?
Well, I try not to. I have a lot of help from volunteer staff. We're a small staff for the size of the botanical garden that we are, so 160 acres, and I have a staff of about 14 horticulturists. And so doing a large plant installation like the 100,000 tulips for Zoo Blooms, we reach out to the community. We have corporate volunteer groups that come in and help us on a regular basis. I have dedicated volunteers that are retired seniors that are here every Thursday morning and working right along with our horticulturists. And we have new partnerships happening too, like partnerships with the Oklahoma County Extension Master Gardeners, bringing them to the zoo, and not just to help us plant tulips, but to be out here on a weekly basis, whether it be doing education in the garden, or helping us pull weeds. Fostering those kind of partnerships really helps me get the job done.
And events-wise, you have one coming up. You want to discuss a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So our Monarch Festival, this will be our second annual Monarch Festival. It's happening here at the end of September, right as the projected migration of monarchs is coming through Oklahoma. Our Monarch Festival supports monarch conservation. We have lots of artists and other nonprofit organizations that come out and spend the day educating our guests. I have milkweed that I'll be giving away in the botanical garden, out in the butterfly garden, to guests that come by, and hopefully they will take it home and plant it in their garden, and that's just kind of extending that the area of milkweed that we have out there. We're also having a Monarch 5K run, I believe that same day or that same weekend, and that's going to be a really exciting new event that we're adding to support monarchs, support pollinators, and get that message out to the general public and our guests. That pollinators are important, monarchs are declining, and planting pollinator gardens can really help make an impact.
And will you be doing a count that day?
We will, yeah. So we'll be
Butterflies?
we'll be counting butterflies, mostly with Monarch Tagging. So we'll be doing tagging in the garden that day. So and we'll bring our guests in and let them help us tag monarchs. So that's really exciting for them to be a part of the research. And my goal this year is to plant or to tag over 200 monarchs, and hopefully we'll have more recovered.
I think you have to be very careful with their wings.
Yeah, absolutely. So they are a butterfly, but they're fairly resilient. You can handle them as long as you're careful, and it does take some tact to get used to tagging monarchs. So we have a monarch training session. We tag monarchs in cooperation with our education department. So that's a group effort, and so we have a training that we go through and teach all our new staff how to tag monarchs and what's really important data to collect for them and things like that.
Makes you want to go to Mexico and see where they roost.
Yes, that would be amazing to see where they roost, but it's a long flight that they take, and so they have to be a resilient species. So handling them shouldn't be a problem.
I was thinking of the tulips in April. That's about the time they're coming back north.
Yes, and
Around in there.
yeah, so our tulips last year bloomed way early. We had an early spring, so we had tulips blooming in February, which is amazing because typically we're thinking more mid-March to mid-April. So that's significant that they bloomed so early last year. This year, since we're in September, usually it's very hot outside, and our gardens are kind of on the end of their growth cycle for the season. But this year we've had some very nice, beautiful weather come through with some 60-degree nights and 80-degree days for the past 2 or 3 weeks, which has been really significant. And I've seen the gardens turn around and start blooming again. All the plants are happy right now, which is just fantastic gardening weather for late September in Oklahoma. So with this early fall that we're having here, it's kind of, I don't know when we'll be able to start planting those tulips, and I don't know when they'll come up for next year because, as I said, gardening in Oklahoma, it's all environmental. It's all about the weather.
Well, in the wintertime, then, when you're not doing that particular aspect of things, what do you do?
So the wintertime, it's all about leaf removal. So we're removing all of our deciduous leaves that are dropped through our large canopy, and then we're also doing lots of tree work. So major tree removal or major hardscape work, whether it be retaining walls or new pathways, large irrigation repairs, those kind of things take place in the winter behind the scenes. And then we're also working, under glass or in our greenhouses, growing out our spring annuals. So we're doing work inside on our special tropical collections that we pull out during the season in the temperate months and then bring back in to store in our greenhouses. We're working on those through the winter and protecting them from plant pests and those kind of things in the greenhouses.
So what's on the horizon?
What's on the horizon? For me, here at the zoo,
Any or all, yes.
so we're undertaking a new botanical garden master plan, a new and exciting plan for the gardens. I've been curator now for almost 2 years, and so being a part of a new and exciting botanical garden master plan that's kind of what's up and coming. We have some new construction going on at the zoo. We're developing our picnic grounds, which have some historic oak groves there that I talked about earlier. Those oak groves are being protected and saved. And with the landscape installation for our picnic grounds, we have a large flower walk with a very nice details of horticulture and gardening going into the picnic renovation. And that's really going to be the center of the new botanical garden and where we're headed in the future. That build and the flower walk and our cross timbers picnic grove is going to be the center of the new botanical garden.
And that's a 5-year plan or longer?
Yeah, so typically I think our master plan is about 10 years, I think, and the botanical garden master plan kind of fits into that. Some things will come sooner rather than later. I see new collections in the future, new botanical garden signage, new programs for guests and for our citizens, new trees. So yeah.
I think I was reading somewhere that the CCC built the park, I guess it's the
The
lake.
amphitheater.
That and
Yeah.
the lake too, maybe around the lake?
They built the bathhouse.
Okay.
The bathhouse that is now our museum.
Okay.
So, yeah. We had a lot of.
So that's considered.
And actually, that's just two. I mean, they built all the grottos along the lakeside. We have a lot of
Mhm.
CCC
Yeah, we
projects
do.
here
Yeah.
at the zoo. And we were actually a campsite for the workers.
Okay.
That's just something new that we have a historian on our team, and she's learned that and been working with some of the other state agencies to learn more about it. But yeah,
The zoo history is quite extensive.
it is. We're 115 years old.
Yeah, very, very interesting history here involving the buildings, our animal collection, and the plant collection.
And it's
So,
always been here in this location?
We're at Wheeler Park was our first location, and then we moved here in 1903, 04, something like that. So we've been in this location since then, which is significant.
Yeah. We flooded down at Wheeler, unfortunately. The river, yeah.
Way before me.
Well, then you can answer that, what's next for you? Besides the PhD, we're going to work on that.
Yes, absolutely. What's next for me?
Are you doing the 5K?
No, I'm going to be.
You'll be working the festival.
I'll be working
That's
the
true.
festival.
You have a good out.
Yeah, so I'll be doing botanical garden tours of the pollinator garden for the Monarch Festival, and I do regular botanical garden tours for the general public through the temperate season. Those will kind of gain some steam, which is nice to have engaging guests that want to learn about the botanical collection, because we are a zoo, but we're also a botanical garden. So that's kind of been my purpose. Other than to save the oak trees, is to bring awareness of the botanical garden to the general public, and bring the botanical garden status up, to that of the animal collection. And I think in the future that I will probably retire from the zoo with a very strong botanical collection, and have built and renovated the gardens and made it the #1 botanical destination in Oklahoma.
And I'm going to assume you've given your mother a personal tour.
Yes, I've given my mother, May, a personal tour, and she still has her roses. At 74 years old, she still gardens, and I still garden with her. And I keep her active and keep her gardening, and I enjoy the time that I have with her in the garden.
And does she have milkweed?
She does have milkweed. She has lots of milkweed, lots of pollinator plants. She loves her butterflies, and she loves her petunias.
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot. Is there anything I need to ask or cover that I haven't?
The zoo's a special place to work. I feel like I've found my calling in life, which is significant for me because as I started out this interview, I wanted to always do something that I loved. I wanted to wake up in the morning and go do something that I loved so I could be happy in life. And I think that horticulture and gardening is something that I love to do, and that going to OSU and has been really significant for me in my life. It's brought me to where I am now, and doing what I love in life has made me happy.
Sure, it's benefiting other people too and made them happy as well. So
I hope so. I hope people are happy when they see the gardens. I hope they see the happiness that I get planting them when they come out and they're blooming beautifully for them.
thank you very much for talking with us today. It's been great.
Thank you very much.